Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tuesday Tips. I'm your host today, Ashley McQuarrie. I'm the VP of Marketing at Grow Schools. As usual, we're here Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern for 10 minutes discussing the biggest challenges that are facing school leaders. And this week, we're thrilled to welcome Marin Smith. Marin's our content manager at Grow Schools and one of the authors of our brand new guide, Connect Through Communication, the Charter School Communications and Media Guide that we just launched. This guide covers everything from writing with clarity and purpose to strategic communication during a crisis. And Marin brings us some really great experience to this conversation. Before she joined Grow Schools, she spent nearly a decade teaching writing and rhetoric at California Polytechnic State University. Helping students to develop their style, voice, and rhetorical awareness. And today we'll be diving into some key elements from Marin's section of the guide, focusing on developing a consistent voice, crafting compelling calls to action, and even taking a look at how AI might enhance or perhaps complicate your school's communication efforts. So Marin, welcome. Let's start with the foundations. What are the key elements of a school's voice that should be defined in a communications guide to ensure consistency across all channels?
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about in our guide is that each school should have a communications guide. And one of the things that should be in that guide is a guide to the school's voice. And so when I think about a school's voice, I really think about it as the personality that comes through in all your communications. So your voice is what makes your school recognizably you, whether someone's reading it on an email or a social post or your website. And in the guide, I talk about how voice is different from tone. So your voice remains relatively constant, and it's your values, your particular way of seeing the world. So if you think about the way you move through your day, for example, as a school leader, from casual conversations with staff to more formal conversations with the board, you're still you in both contexts, right? And your essential voice stays the same, but your tone shifts depending on those different situations. So for a communications guide, I'd recommend defining your school's voice with clear descriptors. And it's your school's, you could think, is my school's voice friendly, or is it more professional? Is it empathetic? Is it inspirational? So we included this whole list of voice descriptors in the guide that can help you think through, how should my school sound? And that's really key in choosing, it's key to choose those attributes and workshop those attributes with your board or whoever else. And your guide should also clarify that the school's voice is different than any individual's voice. So the school leader's voice is different than the school voice, and the official communications should sort of represent a collective identity of the school, not just one person. And that can really help you stay consistent when you're, and it's a good foundation to start with when you're crafting different school communications.
That's so helpful. I love that example and that explanation for the difference between voice and tone, particularly. I think that's really helpful for schools to keep in mind. Let's talk about action. In the guide, you have a whole section about calls to action. What makes a CTA really effective, or versus one that might get ignored?
Yeah, this is something I get very hot and bothered about. And I should say that I'm a parent. I receive a lot of school communications from my daughter's school. And when there's not a call to action, or as we call it in marketing, a CTA, it drives me crazy. So every email, flyer, website page should answer one simple question: what should the reader do next? And it needs to be clear and compelling. And that makes it so that the reader is more likely to take action. So the most effective CTAs are direct. So instead of saying, learn more, or click here or something, it should say, schedule a tour today. Or instead of consider donating, you should say, give $25 to support student learning or to support the library or whatever. So tell your audience exactly what's going to happen when they click that button. And that action-oriented language is really crucial. So if you sort of front load with words like join or discover or claim, you can create like a bit of a sense of urgency. Even having things like a sort of next to the CTA that say limited spots available, or, save your seat or something like that. So, and I often see, schools struggling with this because they try things like click here or learn more, and it's just too vague, and it doesn't tell the audience what they're getting, and it doesn't create any excitement.
Yeah.
So yeah, schedule a tour, apply now, download an enrollment packet. All these CTAs are really clear and compelling, and they should be easy to find. So using a bright color or some contrast in an email or wherever they're sitting is really key as well.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And keeping it focused on like the one thing that you want them to do. Sometimes I see, you can't, fundraise and promote an event and ask people to like sign up for something all in the same flyer,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Too many messages can confuse people and be like, I don't know which thing I'm clicking on because there are so many things. So yeah, that can help a lot.
Just want to take a quick pause here and welcome anybody who might be joining us a little after the top of the hour. We're here with Marin Smith and discussing effective school communication strategies from our new guide, Connect Through Communication. You can catch all our conversations with experts covering the biggest challenges facing school leaders right here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So let's get back to our chat. Marin, we have talked about voice and CTAs, but I'm curious about how these adapt across different situations. How can communicators maintain their authentic voice while also adapting their tone for different audiences and situations?
Yeah, this is such a good question because it gets to the heart of really rhetoric and effective communication. And so as we talked about before, and as I mentioned in the guide, your authentic voice remains consistent even as your tone shifts to meet each situation. So as a school leader, you can convey both warmth and professionalism at the same time. So whether you're drafting a school email about a crisis situation or a sensitive issue or commenting on a teacher evaluation, your tone should reflect both sort of the professionalism and importance of your role and your humanity at the same time. So the goal isn't to sound like someone else's version of a school leader or a robot school leader, but to be really intentional about how your natural voice adapts to serve your community in different contexts. So one thing, when I used to work with students, I would ask them to explain to me what they were trying to say in a certain passage. And when they would explain it to me in using speech, I would say, oh, that's crystal clear now. And it makes a whole lot more sense because you weren't reaching for that academic language like you maybe were in a paper or trying to sound different than yourself. And so writing the way that you speak can really be a good goal with these types of situations. So you can have an excited or enthusiastic tone if the situation calls for it, but what remains consistent is sort of this underlying sense of you and your authentic voice. And that's where, again, harping on this a little bit, but having a written communications guide for your school can really help with this balance. And it defines, not just the overall voice of your school, but how you can adapt to tone and that can help you think through it for your own writing as well. There's no rule that says you can't have a communications guide for yourself that says, okay, and this kind of goes into the part that we'll get to about AI. How can AI help you think through, okay, how do I want to sound on a teacher evaluation versus an email to parents?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I did want to ask you, we're hearing a lot of buzz about using AI tools, obviously, for writing and for everything else. You do have some great advice in the guide about this. So how can AI writing assistants help school communicators to maintain that consistency in their voice and tone.
Yeah, AI tools are amazing and they can be amazing time savers. And the key is to teach AI to write like you or your school. So you need to introduce AI to your communications guide. You can just feed it right in there to generative AI and say, this is how my school likes to sound, or here's some writing that I created that really sounds a lot like me. This is how I sound. And these examples will help AI recognize kind of the nuances, things that you might not notice about your own writing, like sentence structure or word choice. And using AI to generate content, of course, as we hear a lot, you want to review it carefully to ensure that it reflects the right voice and tone. And if it doesn't quite capture your school's style, you can give it feedback and say, this is too formal. Can you make it more conversational or approachable? So if you're someone who struggles with writing, AI is like an incredible tool in this way. And you can also ask AI to adapt to different contexts. So you can tell AI who the audience is, or be specific, like this is a crisis communication. And it will help you kind of shift things to be either more neutral or more straightforward. But the key is to use it as a collaborative tool and not a replacement. And this I'm really emphatic about in the guide. Use AI as a collaborative tool, not a replacement for a human being.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Well, it looks like we're right at around 12 minutes. So I want to thank you, Marin, for joining us today. For those of you who are watching, you can download our complete Connect Through Communications guide by visiting growschools.com. We've got a whole library of resources over there to check out. The communications guide is just packed with all sorts of templates and examples and expert advice from Marin and her co-authors. So definitely check that out. And thank you again to Marin and to everyone who joined us today. We'll see you next time on Tuesday Tips. Bye.
Thanks, Ashley. Bye.